Tell me more about the healthy dopamine. So, what happens, for instance, when we are exercising or doing saunas, cold baths, or eating healthy? What happens to our dopamine? Why did you say that we need to work for that?
Yeah. So if you go back to this pleasure pain balance or this teeter-totter, it turns out that if we intentionally press on the pain side, for example, by exercising, those gremlins will go over to the pleasure side.
And they move.
They move. They will go wherever they need to go. Yeah, right. Because remember, the goal is to level the balance, right? Yeah. We don't get to stay in pleasure or pain, for that matter, forever. And they will tip us to the pleasure side, and we will get our dopamine indirectly by paying for it up front. And that way of getting dopamine is much more insulated from addiction, because it's hard to get dopamine that way, right? Yeah. You have to work for it. Yeah. But what's really fascinating is that studies show that when we exercise or we do an ice cold water plunge, what happens to dopamine is we don't get this sudden dopamine spike like we do with drugs. What we get is a gradual increase in dopamine levels over the latter half of the exercise. And then when we stop exercising, those dopamine levels remain elevated for hours afterwards before going back down to baseline levels of dopamine firing. And they never go into that dopamine deficit state, or they typically do. We don't think they do, which means that we don't set ourselves up for that cycle of craving, intoxication. Now, can people get addicted to exercise? We absolutely do see that, especially when combined with calorie restriction.